and record. So tonight is Monday, October the 10th. Welcome to the weekly accountability call. I'm glad to see some familiar faces on here and people I hadn't seen in a little while. So we were just going over our wins of the week, and tonight's content is all about family. So, and not necessarily just like your immediate family, whether that be your kids and your husband, but even your extended family. And we'll even loop in friends who are family into that, because I think anybody that you come into regular contact with, you have the power to influence them and their health choices. It was funny in our Jackie was there at church yesterday, but Pastor Danny had said something about drinking soda and like eating junk food and whatever. And he was like, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but like, it's a really good thing we got a lot of medical professionals in this room, because, which I just thought was kind of funny and humorous, because even from the pulpit, he was able to like encourage people to eat a little healthier and to surround themselves with healthier people as well. Because like I mentioned before we started recording, healthier people are happier people. I don't know what else to tell you. They're better human beings. If you meet people who chronically, I'm not saying like you having a soda or stopping by Wendy's one day is like sabotaging the whole thing. But if you make a habit out of incorporating unhealthy behaviors in your life, I've also found that those unhealthy behaviors in your eating end up in unhealthy behaviors in your mental health, end up not taking care of yourself, which spills out into other people. A lot of times it can lead to chronic inflammation, fatigue, and pain, which we all know. People that are constantly tired, constantly in pain, guess what? They're also constantly cranky. And nobody likes to be around constantly cranky people. So improving your overall health, whether that be through fitness and exercise or through nutrition, typically makes you a happier person. I always think back to Legally Blonde, which we all know, where she's like, happy people don't, endorphins make happy people don't kill their husbands. It kind of makes me laugh, but also I feel like everybody on this call can certainly identify with this. No matter how much you've had a morning where you're like, I don't want to work out, I don't want to do this, I'm in a crappy mood, you have never left a workout in a worse mood than you started. I think it's actually impossible. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that can prove the point wrong, but I have never in 8+ years of exercising daily I may not have been in the best mood afterwards. Like maybe my mood was real low and I just like kind of went up 1 or 2 notches, but I have never ended a workout in a worse mood than when I started. I think the chemicals in your brain won't allow that to happen. And so I think it's really easy to kind of talk about that piece of it with the exercise, because I feel like that's such a quick win. You do a 15-minute bike ride, you do a 30-minute workout, you lift some weights, all of a sudden you feel better, quick win. Where it gets a little trickier is with the nutrition, because number one, oh, look at that. Huh, I went to full screen. Sorry, it scared me. And I totally lost my train of thought. With nutrition, sometimes it's a more cumulative effect with the poor decisions and with the healthy decisions. Because the reality is, one cheeseburger and fries is not going to make you an unhealthy human being, right? It just isn't. It's a compound effect. In the same way that one really great healthy salad is not going to make you a healthy person. It is the accumulated effects of all of the decisions that you're making as an average to make you a more wholly healthy person. And so I want to, obviously, this is going to start with you. You can't really influence your family or those around you to be healthier if you are not actively engaged in a healthy behavior. That's hypocritical behavior, and all you're doing is preaching to people that don't trust you and don't believe you. And so I want to make sure that no matter what we're trying to do in our circles of influence, we always, always, always start with ourselves. And I will say, I shouldn't need to say it, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. This isn't a one-off kind of thing. It's not an 8-week program. It's not a 21-day fix. It's not that in order to influence the people around you. It is oftentimes years and years and years and years and years of influencing the people around you. Number one, you have to build trust with them. They also have been around you for a very long time and seen the cumulative effects of your bad decisions. And so maybe they don't trust you. Maybe they don't trust that this is not just another diet that mommy wants to do. And in, 4 weeks or the next holiday, it'll be fine. We can go back to eating Doritos afterwards. You have to say, no, this is the way we are now and forevermore. It's not now until, my high school reunion, now until this 8-week program is over, now until 75 hard is done. Like, this is who we are as a family. There's nothing wrong with trying something for a short amount of time. And that's kind of my first tip for everybody. Is adopt an attitude of experimentation. I say that in my meal plans. I say that in your welcome email. I say it like a thousand times. But I think when we adopt an attitude of experimentation, specifically when it comes to food, it softens the blow for our families, because I think where they get scared is, I'm never going to be allowed to have this, whatever it is, fill in the blank, whatever they don't want to let go ever again. And so instead of like accepting this as a healthy change, they hoard it and they hold it close, right? If somebody told me I wasn't allowed to have whatever it is forever, I'm just a rebellious person in general. I would be like, no, 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 no. And I'd stuff it all down my shirt and I'd run away, right? Like, that's just who I am. Our families are no different than that. Our kids are no different than that. Whether your kid is 2 or whether your kid is 32, it really doesn't matter. If you try to go in and, this is another reason I tell people when they first start with me, don't overhaul your kitchen. Don't go into your pantry, excuse me, and throw all the things away. I want you to gradually shift your family into a healthier dynamic, because number one, research is just going to tell you small incremental changes have bigger lasting effects. But number two, they're so much happier with the changes that you're making when you aren't stripping them of everything they think they need and love, right? It's kind of like, when you're trying to, I think one of the first things, this is kind of a side story. When I very first started coaching, I developed a program. It was a clean eating boot camp, and it was a 7-day clean eating boot camp. And you guys should know, well, maybe you don't know this because all of you guys are recent within the last 2 years of this, but your coaching practice evolves as you evolve. So as I have grown and learned, so are the things that I'm teaching, as it should be, right? And so one of the things that I used to do was a 7-day boot camp. And so when you got into my 7-day boot camp, it was a free thing. I stripped you of all of the things that you love. So there was no processed food whatsoever for 7 days. There was no caffeine whatsoever for 7 days. There was no artificial sweeteners, nothing like that for 7 straight days. And also no sugar for 7 straight days. Guess how many people lasted the full 7 days? Like hardly any. Like, I mean, maybe like 1 or 2 people. Why I thought that was an effective way. But if they even made it to day 5 or 6, they were friggin' miserable, and they hated me, right? So sorry, I think like something tickling my throat. So what came out of that was that if we could start to work on replacing and trying something new, kind of going back to the attitude of experimentation, trying something new for a little while, then people were just so much easier to adopt it, right? And so that's the thing that I came up with for my family, was every recipe, every change, every product we buy, everything that we were shifting into a healthier way of being. I went to them with an attitude of experimentation. Let's try this new recipe. Let's try this new way of making fill in the blank and see if we like it. And if we don't like it, guess what? We never have to make it this way again. We're going to try a different way, but we never have to do this again. And that's okay. And what it also did was open up the line of communication, both with my husband and my children, so that they felt like they were being heard in this. Because if it's not just a me change, and if it's a we change, they need a voice in this too, right? And so if they feel powerless and they feel like they have no voice, they're going to end up rebelling, and it's just not going to work out for anybody. And then you're going to feel bad. It's a whole thing. So instead, if they didn't like something, I gave them full permission to tell me, I don't like that. But here's the catch with that. I never let them stop there. Why didn't you like it? What was it about blank that you did not like? Because then it caused them to start reflecting on, was it the spices in it? Was it the texture? Was it the choice of meat? Was whatever it was, I needed them to learn how to articulate what it was that they didn't like so that they could start helping me make better decisions on what we were going to try next. Because again, I feel like it's like, uh and let's take chips for example, right? Like chips are a pretty universally like held thing that number one, the majority of chips are not really great for you, and number two, most families like chips. They're an easy snack that you can throw into a container or a bag and throw in the lunchbox and go, right? And they decently fill you up. Obviously it's not a main staple of your meal, but it's not this like it's not fluff, it's like when Eden tells me she's hungry and then she's like, yeah, I want a container of Jello. I'm like, girlfriend, Jello's not gonna fill you up. You're not hungry, you're bored, that's a whole separate conversation. But chips kind of have a little weight to them in your belly. So if somebody says to you, you try a new brand of chips and they're like, I don't like it. Okay, what do you not like about it? Well, it's not Doritos. That's not solution minded, right? Like I'm in the business of helping people be more solution oriented. Because it is not the thing that you want to replace is not a good enough thing. Like maybe it was like we said, the seasonings or the consistency or whatever. But knowing too, this kind of leads into the next part, that this stuff takes time. Your taste buds can change. And I think that was one of the most like radical new things for me when I started this was I thought you like what you like, and that's the end of that. If you don't like it now, you're never going to like it. I didn't like squash and I'm never going to like squash. Well, what I found out through my degree in research and all this other stuff was that your taste buds are a byproduct of what you feed them. So your taste buds are going to be more bent towards sweets if you continue to feed them sweets. Your taste buds are going to be more bent towards salty if you continue to feed it salty. Your taste buds are going to crave and desire and think certain things are delicious and yummy if those are the things you're feeding it. And so if your taste buds are used, or your families are used to a highly processed diet filled with preservatives and chemicals and all kinds of things, guess what? Whole food's going to taste boring. It's going to taste bland. It's going to taste yucky. And my favorite not compliment is it tastes too healthy. I'm like, okay, well, it's not really helpful. I can't really fix the fact that Brussels sprouts taste like Brussels sprouts, right? And they taste too healthy. And so making sure that you know and remind the people around you, like your taste buds change. So maybe you didn't like it this time, but maybe you could try it again. One of the ways that we've found in our family that works really, really well for that is trying specifically with vegetables, trying things in a different way. Like just because you didn't like green beans out of a can doesn't mean you don't like green beans. Just because you didn't like sweet potatoes with cinnamon and butter on them doesn't mean you don't like sweet potatoes with garlic and salt and pepper on them. Knowing that sometimes, especially kids, they say that they don't like certain things, but what they really don't like is the cooked version of them. They might like the raw version of them. And I think that was one of the things that was an aha for me with my kids, was that my kids do not like cooked bell peppers. Absolutely do not. They have to be tiny. I mean, like they have to be really incorporated in. And even then, sometimes they will pick them out, specifically Davin. But you know what? They'll both eat raw bell peppers, specifically with hummus. And I think that that's where, especially with families with children and even adults, but mostly with children, we think that if they're dipping it in ketchup or they're dipping it in ranch dressing or whatever, it's negating the fact that it's a healthier food. Guess what? It actually isn't. I don't give a flying toot if my kids dip their bell peppers in ranch or ketchup or hummus or whatever. Guess what? They're still eating a bell pepper. And at some point, they aren't always going to drown it in ranch dressing, So maybe teaching them moderation with sauces and stuff, but knowing that these kind of things get better with time. And just because the first time they did it, they put cheese all over their broccoli, the next time lower the cheese a little bit, the next time a little bit more, the next time a little bit more. It reminds me of and this is kind of a weird, rabbit trail story, but I help assist coach in the jujitsu gym where my kids and us and my husband and I train. And when I went through the training, and let me preface this with saying I had been training and my children had been training for a year and a half before I took the assistant instructor's course for the children's class, and the women's class. And it's an online course developed by the people who developed Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And they have this motto, I don't know what's the right word for it, this concept of perfect. They say perfect. The child does the move, perfect, great job, keep going. Was the move perfect? No. Was it even close to perfect? Probably not. And I was like, that's so rude. Then all of a sudden you start hearing your coach say, oh, perfect. And you're like, liar, that is not perfect. But what they were talking about, and I love this psychological principle, is if you continue to positively reinforce people who are doing good behaviors, even if it's not perfect, even if it is not the exact way you would do it, they will do it again. And the next time they do it, it's going to be a little better. And then the next time they do it, it's going to be even better. And so as they continue to train in jujitsu, you can continue to tweak. Oh, hey, next time you do that, just put your hand a little farther forward. Hey, next time, and you're able to slowly shift and mold these better behaviors. And so, my mindset was always, I was kind of raised this way. It's like, if you can't do it right, don't do it at all, which is a load of complete BS, right? Like, I hate that mindset now. I think, like, what a destructive way of teaching people how to do things. And number two was, if the way you practice it is the way you're always going to do it. I think with sports and with running and with, instruments and things like that, that's harped on a lot. It's like, well, if you start running it wrong, you're always going to do it wrong. That's not true. We are nimble, agile, flexible brained humans. And so guess what? You are allowed to learn over time how to do things better, as long as it is not something that is going to specifically hurt them in training. They will get better. Obviously you want to correct behaviors that are destructive and hurtful or going to cause an injury. But if they're not doing it exactly right, it's okay. That exact same principle applies with nutrition and getting your family on board to eat healthier too. Because if you can over time shift them into better eating habits, they will get there. You just have to trust and have a little faith that it's going to work out over time, that the methods work if you keep working them. And so that's kind of those things I feel like were the main things that really shifted my family. And I will say, like, do my children eat perfect? Jackie eats with my kids at least once a week in some capacity, right? No, they don't eat perfect. Like, it's a work in progress, but so am I. And it's okay. I want them to know that they're able to change and they're able to choose healthier things, and giving them the freedom and flexibility to choose that, to kind of broaden this scope into our spouses, our friends, our families, our coworkers, things like that. I think the number one thing that I would continue to encourage people to do is to have the options available. Are you going to change we're all women here on this call. Are you going to change a grown man's preferences? Probably not overnight. But if you continue to offer the healthier option, at some point, they will choose it. They will be hungry enough to choose it, right? And so I think that if you continue to offer that, and I never want to diminish a grown man's manhood, right? They are not children, they're grown men, and they deserve to be treated with the respect that a grown man does. But they are also still human beings. And just like me being a human being who can, be tricked into doing things the right way, right? We can use some of those techniques on them too, the same ones we use with our kids. So mixing vegetables into our spaghetti sauce, putting thing like, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot you didn't like, bell peppers on whatever it is. Like, you can pick them off if you want, but the option was there, right? Maybe they ate a little bit and we're just gonna sneak it in here and there where we can. But really giving them the options and the availability. And I don't know the dynamic of each of your households or the people watching this recording's households. I can only speak for the dynamic that happens in the Porter house. But I do the shopping, and I do the meal planning, and I do the cooking, and I do most of the cleaning, specifically now that Matt's not here, right? But even when he's home, I do the majority of it. And so I get to take ownership of what I purchase. So taking some ownership and really, I think I've said this maybe to each of you, but I'll remind anybody watching the recording or you guys, you are allowed not to buy things that people like. Just because they like Doritos does not mean it has to make it into your basket. And so maybe you can start shifting things that way too. I remember I had a conversation. This was when my kids were still in preschool. And I don't think this applies to anybody in this specific call, but if you're watching the recording and you have little ones, let me be the not so nice person that tells you your little one doesn't pay your grocery bills. And so your little one does not get to dictate what goes into the cart. And so if your little one has issues with all she or he ever wants to do is eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and goldfish, guess what, Mom? Don't buy peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and goldfish. If the option isn't available, if they are a neurotypical child, they are not going to starve. I promise. They will eat when they are hungry, and you can continue to offer the things that are appropriate in that way. I can't tell you how many times my kids have gone to bed hungry because I don't care. I don't care. You will be okay. You are the 2022 American middle class child. You aren't starving. Get over yourself. Like, you'll eat when you're hungry in the morning then, and I think having a little bit of a spine and a backbone will serve you very well in helping your family to adopt new and healthy changes. The last thing I want to talk about is kind of broadening that even more. And that actually, I want to say one more thing specifically about spouses, because I know a lot of people, whether they're on this call or not, I don't know, but or watching the recording, but I do know I have a lot of conversations with people whose spouses are not on board, whose spouses do not have a desire to eat healthy and don't give a flying crap. I know that we want to make our spouses happy. I do. It is a good and noble thing to want to please your spouse, but you can please them into the grave. And so I would encourage you to, again, get a little bit of a backbone and remember that even if your spouse is one that will, I had a girl one time who told me, well, he's just going to go to Taco Bell later tonight anyway, then let him. You know what? That should not affect the way that you cook and eat and feed yourself. Make the healthy meal. And if he wants to make a decision that is detrimental to his health, then that's what it is for him. My mother-in-law is a really good example of this. She swears, which I still don't understand, and I wish she would get it. Her husband is a meat and potatoes man. That's what she says all the time, constantly. I mean, I thousands of times this woman in 15 years of marriage has told me that her husband, Carl, is a meat and potatoes kind of guy. And that's why I struggle to eat healthy. I'm like, well, Reeves, there's nothing wrong with meat and potatoes. So I don't really understand what the problem is. You're allowed to not, if you're trying to limit your carbs, whatever, in the evening, don't put potatoes on your plate. The meat and the potatoes are not one congealed item. So maybe you could not put whatever it is, that even if you've made it for your family, you don't have to put it on your plate. And that's something that I think, especially if there are families in our group, and I'm sure there are, because like attracts like, where maybe the wife feels like she needs to work on losing a little bit of weight, but the husband is actually underweight or does not need to lose weight. That was our family situation from the very beginning. Matt is he's a smaller framed man. He's got a very high metabolism, and he's a long distance runner. He does not need to eat the same way I eat. And so I oftentimes have to make a starch or a carb for him in the evening, because otherwise he will burn through it quick. He does not have extra body fat to shed. And so just because I made rice, just because I made potatoes, just because I made the things, doesn't mean I have to put them on my plate. And so there's some self-discipline involved with making sure that you're making the appropriate choice for your body, even if you're offering, an extended version of that to your family. So I did want to kind of put that out there as well. And the last thing I wanted to say before we wrap this up and go into questions is just about the extension. So whether that be your extended family, adult children, your cousins and aunties and uncles and whoever that you interact with on a not daily basis, maybe you go over to their house, is just to be the example, to be the girl that brings the healthy side dish every time. We have a Bible study every Sunday night, used to be every Thursday night when I was Jackie and I were in Bible study together, and Jackie can attest how many times I brought a vegetable side, how many times I brought a salad, how many times I brought, like, I am known as the girl who brings the vegetables. Last night for our group, I brought chili to go on top of hot dogs because that's what I was specifically asked to bring. So I did not bring a vegetable side. So guess what Bible study group had no vegetables at the attendance? Because I am the girl who brings the vegetables. So if I'm not bringing the vegetables, they aren't there. So know that that's not a like, well, and let me also say this before I say anything else about it. I can't tell you how many times people were like, man, we don't have any vegetables tonight. Where are the vegetables? Danielle, I thought you were still going to bring the vegetables. I was like, no, you asked me to bring something very specific. So they are wanted. I've never gone home with an empty or with a full veggie tray at an event. I have never gone home with a full side dish of vegetables. People will eat them if they're offered. So be the girl that brings them. And let that be your thing, I promise you there will be more than enough desserts. There will be more than enough, at the company potluck. There are always enough potato mayonnaise based salads, like especially if you live south of the Mason-Dixon line. Like, I promise you they're there whether you bring them or not. So be the girl that brings the healthy thing, because if nothing else, that might be the only healthy thing at that event, and so you can leave knowing you did one healthy thing for yourself. And then you will notice that people will start to know you for that. And in the beginning, especially if you've been a chronic dieter, somebody who's back and forth, you might get some weird comments about like, oh, well, there's Danielle, she's on a diet. And I'm like, nope, not on a diet. This is how I eat. And just kind of walk off after that, but just know after time, that kind of stuff goes away. And sometimes that stuff comes from your closest family, not necessarily your spouse or your internal home family, but like your parents or your aunties or your adult children or whatever. And so don't get upset about it. I feel like it's kind of like when two kids are picking on each other, the more you react, the more they're going to talk. Don't react. Say the truth and move on. We had something the other day, an issue in our household, and Davin said something, or Eden said something ugly to Davin that was not true. And he blew up, and then she blew up, and it became this big, massive thing, right? And I was trying to like parent coach Davin. And I'm like, if you had just said, Eden, that's ridiculous. I'm not, whatever it is, that's not who I am. That would have been the end of the discussion and nobody would have been in trouble. But instead, you both chose to escalate it and now you're both in trouble. So the same lesson applies for us here. We don't have to try to influence those around us with big, long speeches about cholesterol and, excess body fat and how you got to eat healthier and like lead by example. Make it very short and very sweet and be like, oh, I don't eat like that. You don't have to tell them they're wrong. You don't have to give them a lecture on why fast food's going to kill them. I don't eat like that, and move on, So I do think that those things in the last 8 years have been really beneficial for helping my immediate family and those around me be a little healthier. So I hope that they also help you. I'm going to stop